Hello, it's Simone. How are you guys? Thanks for tuning in. I want to talk about why delegation doesn't work. I mean, most of business owners, most entrepreneurs, most leaders, CEOs have heard or been told that delegation is how to get stuff done, how to scale the company, how to leverage the team. However, that's where things tend to go horribly wrong. You and I probably have grown up being told what to do, and that's how most people learn how to do business. They're being told what to do and they execute, and if they execute right, it's a job well done. If they don't, it's not happening. However, if you really want to get things done right and you want to be able to trust the team and you want to be able to know that it got done right the way you would have done it, this is not how it's working anymore. So let's talk a little bit about why delegation is a thing of the past. Because what's in our DNA is going from transactional to transformational. That's what I always talk about in every context there is. And it's the only way to engage people and to get them up, to show up and have ownership over what they're doing. And also to understand the why behind what they're doing so that they don't have to ask you 25 questions every 5 minutes. So how do you get to that, right? Really good question. A lot of our business owner clients, some of them are CEOs, entrepreneurs, business leaders, all different industries. It's the same problem all across the board. And it happens because the engagement isn't there and the larger understanding and the bigger picture of the business isn't there. So when we talk about delegation, it generally means you're being handed a small piece, a small task out of the big picture. And if you don't have the entire background, if you don't understand how it all fits together, it's really hard to do a good job. So it was really interesting. I read this article in Harvard Business Review, and it was talking about how only 7% of employees truly understand how what they're doing impacts the entire organization and how it all fits together. I mean, I don't know, think about your last job. When I think about the jobs I had in college or after college, I certainly had no idea what the company was really doing and how I was doing was affecting every organization across the board in the company. I had no idea, and I think most people don't, most employees don't, and that's what that study is showing. That happens because things so often are done in that old way of leadership, which is what delegation is. So you're being told to do this little thing out of this big picture and it's not working out. So the new style is much more about really understanding, sharing in the vision, sharing in the information, having a very effective way of communicating, very effective way of lining up with each other, and making sure that that's done consistently so everybody can do a good job and also gets the benefits and the rewards and the acknowledgement for doing this really good job. So like I said, transactional to transformation is what we want to pay attention to in everything we do. And the first distinction is a lot of you have probably been told that management is not the same as leadership. So management is, again, what many of us are probably used to, where we're being told what to do, we execute, and then we get some sort of feedback, this was done well or wasn't done well. But when people are just used to that style of management, they're missing a lot of the pieces. So what we really want to think about, what goes wrong when you only give people this small amount of information? Well, for one thing, perfection isn't what's going to happen. When you tell somebody how you want something done, unless you take your brain and you transfer it into their head, they're not going to do it exactly the way you want it. So, and that requires a ton of direction, that requires a ton of constantly realigning and making sure that they exactly know what you're talking about. However, if you take this and make it a whole different process where you give them the vision of what you're doing and you're giving them the direction for what the outcome, the end product is, and then you leave it up to them to find the path, the how, so that they can come up with what's in their brain, it's a much different story. Suddenly you're still, as the leader, you still get the outcome you're looking for because you defined that very, very clearly, but you're giving them the chance to come up with their own method and their own metrics to make sure that they get it done the way that the company needs them to get it done. Now, of course, what that requires is that you as the leader can let go of having it done exactly your way. And that's where it gets really sticky, because that means you have to let go. And I know when you are an entrepreneur, when you've come up with this amazing thing, it's really hard to do, because that means you have to let somebody else take over the helm, and you have to be okay with how they're doing it, even if it would be if it's different from how you would be doing it. But that's really where the strength and the power of the team comes in, when you, instead of having just one brain, yours, on the job, suddenly you have 10, 20, 50, 100 people who are thinking through what needs to be done, and they're coming up with all different ways of solving this that you would have never thought of. So instead of just having one level, you have 10, 20, 50 levels of getting this thing done, and so much more input and information and brilliance that you would have missed if you had just made people do it your way. So being perfect, being a perfectionist, and having other people execute what you want them to do is always going to be a really hard thing. So think about how that changes. So what changes if you're thinking old style to new style of leadership? So you're going from management to leadership. So that means you're giving a whole lot more freedom. You're giving a whole lot more bandwidth. You're letting people interact and execute in the way that's best for them. The next thing is we're going from delegating, like we talked about earlier, to directing. So instead of chunking it down into tiny little pieces and just giving people the small amount of information that they need to execute on this one thing, you're giving them direction that fits like a puzzle piece into the big picture of the company. So now that they have direction, and of course they're experts at what they're doing, they can come up with the best way how to do that. So you're going from delegating to getting direction. In other ways, what we're discovering right now is so many people working remotely, what should be happening is that the pay is for contribution and not for time. So people tend to actually be a lot more responsible and have more ownership when, of course, they have to be trained how to do this right, but once they're trained, they understand the rules of engagement. They get to do things when it works best for them. They get to create the outcome that you're asking for, and how and when they do that, as long as it fits into the timeline of the company, shouldn't matter. Gives people a lot more freedom, makes people a lot more accountable, and gets them to show up the best way possible. Let's talk about transformational meetings. Like, I'm sure everybody's been in meetings before where you were just talked at, and there was somebody up there who was just going on and on and on and on, and most people in the room are doodling or looking at their phone or typing in their computer, checking email, all that stuff. So when you're just being talked at in a meeting, there's not a whole lot of engagement happening. And what meetings are really for is to share your brains. They're there not to get a company update. I mean, that's what should happen once a month. And on the side, that's a totally different story. But if you're in your weekly meeting and all that happens is a talking head in front of the room, that's not going to create a whole lot of engagement either. So think about what your meetings are really there for. They're there to share in the outcomes. They share in the problem solving. So you have a whole bunch of people who are looking at a challenge and they're solving it together. So it's interactive. You get people to show up. They come prepared. They talk. They participate. Anybody in a meeting should be either there to give or to receive, or ideally do both. So if that's not happening in your meetings, something isn't going right. So we have that. And then one of the most important practices in a company should be regular one-on-ones. And if your regular one-on-ones, one of my clients in the beginning when we were working together said to me, look, this is when I get to beat up on my direct reports. And I mean, he's not the only person who's ever said that to me. So if that's how you're doing it right now, if that's your time to give critical feedback, well, I'm not saying you can't do that, But if that's all you're doing, you're losing out on a lot of brilliance and engagement and loyalty. So what you get to do in one-on-ones is you get to coach, you get to inspire, and you get to unblock, so people can really show up and do the best thing they could possibly be doing for your company. And this is how you're building incredible loyalty. And that loyalty is what you really need when things are not going right in the company, and you need to have people show up and really give it their all and give it 120%. So one hint I want to give you guys is, every time you want to go back to just delegation or just telling people what to do or giving direction that's too granular and doesn't allow for any creativity, think this: what would a leader do? So if you were truly a leader, would you be saying and doing these things? If you came from a leadership perspective, instead of somebody who's managing, who's going for perfection, what would be the engagement that you'd be getting back if you acted truly like a leader? So ask yourself that question: what would a leader do? And when you are tempted to just give answers, ask more questions. And that's really where so many opportunities get missed, and where there's so many chances for engaging and coming up with much higher performance than you're getting, is ask those questions. Really find out, where are people coming from, what are they going for, what are they missing, what do they need right now, so they can do a much better job. So in those one-on-ones, ask the questions, really look for coaching opportunities so that you can help grow that person, okay? So let's think about, what would a leader do? Ask more questions. And then, I don't know who said this a long time ago, but when you think about the difference in teaching and coaching, it's telling people what to do versus how to think. And that's, again, one of the hugest differences between management and leadership, is teaching them how to think. Because if you can teach anybody who's working with you to think through a problem the way you would, but then they're bringing their own perspective and their own expertise to it, then suddenly you have a much, much higher level of performance. So I hope this is helpful. Think about how to get rid of delegating and start leading. And I hope you guys are having a fantastic week.